My name is Linda. I'm 28 years old, and 10 years ago, my family called me ugly and disowned me at high school graduation. Standing outside this elegant country club wedding venue in Connecticut today, watching my sister Rose's wedding celebration through the windows, they have absolutely no idea that the awkward, overweight girl they rejected has become one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. The family that once removed me from photos because I was embarrassing is about to discover that their discarded daughter built a $500 million company. They had no idea the ugly duckling had become something extraordinary. Before we dive into this incredible transformation story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you believe people can overcome family rejection. And don't forget to subscribe, because this journey from outcast to success will show you that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming unstoppable. Let me take you back to where this story really began. The pain started long before graduation day, but that's when everything finally shattered beyond repair. Growing up in our wealthy Connecticut family, I was always the disappointment compared to my sister Rose, who was 2 years older, and everything our parents wanted in a daughter. My father was a successful corporate lawyer at a prestigious firm, and my mother was a socialite who cared more about appearances than anything else in the world. While Rose was naturally beautiful with flowing blonde hair, perfect skin, and an effortless grace that made her popular at our exclusive private school, I struggled with severe cystic acne that no dermatologist seemed able to control. I wore thick glasses that made my eyes look tiny, carried extra weight that made me self-conscious in every social situation, and had braces that created a lisp whenever I tried to speak up in class. My personality was awkward and introverted, especially compared to Rose's confident charm that drew people to her like a magnet. Our parents never tried to hide their disappointment in how I looked. Family dinners were filled with constant comparisons, where they would praise Rose's latest modeling photo for the school yearbook while suggesting I might want to try harder with my appearance. When relatives visited for holidays, they would parade Rose around like a prize, while I was often encouraged to help in the kitchen or find something quiet to do upstairs. The worst part was how they treated my academic achievements. Despite being valedictorian of my graduating class with a perfect SAT score and acceptance to MIT with a full scholarship, my parents seemed more concerned about how I would look in the graduation photos than celebrating my intellectual accomplishments. They hired a professional photographer for Rose's graduation 2 years earlier, but for mine, they reluctantly agreed to attend only after I begged them not to miss the most important day of my academic life. Graduation day itself was a nightmare I still remember in vivid detail. I had worked incredibly hard to earn the honor of giving the valedictorian speech, staying up countless nights perfecting every word about perseverance and believing in yourself despite obstacles. When I walked across that stage to receive my diploma and deliver my speech, I looked out at the audience expecting to see my parents' proud faces, but instead I saw my mother checking her phone and my father looking around the auditorium with obvious embarrassment. After the ceremony, other families were taking photos and celebrating, but my parents were already discussing how quickly we could leave. When my best friend Deborah's family invited us to join them for dinner, my mother made an excuse about having other commitments, even though I knew we had no plans for the evening. The breaking point came when we got home, and I asked if we could take a family photo to commemorate my graduation. My mother looked at me with genuine disgust and said, "How can we introduce you to our friends looking like that? Your skin is a disaster, your hair looks awful, and that dress makes you look even heavier than usual." My father, instead of defending me, nodded in agreement and delivered the ultimatum that changed everything. "Linda, you're 18 now and about to start college. Either you get plastic surgery to fix these problems, or you can't expect our continued support. We've been patient with your appearance issues, but we can't keep pretending everything is fine when you're embarrassing our family name." I was devastated, but also angry enough to find my voice for the first time in years. I told them that I wouldn't change my appearance to meet their shallow standards, that my intelligence and character mattered more than conforming to their superficial expectations. I said I would rather succeed on my own terms than live my life trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. That's when my mother said the words that still echo in my mind, "Fine, we don't have an ugly daughter anymore. You can figure out your own life without dragging down our family's reputation." Rose, who I had hoped might defend me, or at least remain neutral, chose their side completely. She told me I was being dramatic and that I should just fix myself instead of making everything difficult for everyone else. She said I was selfish for not considering how my appearance affected the family's social standing, and that maybe some time away would help me gain perspective about what really mattered. Within a week, they had cut off all financial support, removed my photos from the house, and made it clear that I was no longer welcome at family gatherings or events. My father even went as far as having his secretary change their emergency contact information at my school to exclude me entirely. I left for MIT that fall with nothing but my scholarship money. The contents of my childhood bedroom packed into 2 suitcases and a determination to prove that their definition of worth was fundamentally wrong. The last thing my mother said to me as I loaded my belongings into my friend's car was that she hoped college would teach me some humility about my unrealistic expectations for how the world should treat people who didn't make an effort with their appearance. College at MIT was simultaneously the most challenging and liberating experience of my life. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence and innovation over superficial appearances, though the transition from family rejection to academic independence was incredibly difficult emotionally and financially. I worked multiple jobs to support myself since my parents had completely cut off financial assistance. During the week, I tutored struggling students in mathematics and computer science, earning enough to cover basic necessities, but never enough to feel financially secure. Weekends were spent providing tech support for local businesses, crawling under desks to fix computer networks, and teaching small business owners how to use basic software programs. My most lucrative work came from freelance coding projects that I completed late at night after finishing my coursework. I built websites for local restaurants, created inventory management systems for small retailers, and even developed a simple mobile app for a campus food delivery service. The work was exhausting, but taught me practical skills that went far beyond what I was learning in my computer science classes. The physical transformation happened gradually and naturally during this period, though it was never my primary focus. The stress of supporting myself combined with walking everywhere around campus and eating simple, healthy meals, because I couldn't afford expensive processed foods, led to significant weight loss. My skin began clearing up partly due to better nutrition, but mainly because I was finally old enough for my hormones to stabilize. I saved money for contact lenses instead of replacing my thick glasses, which completely changed how my face looked. More importantly, I was building genuine confidence through my academic and professional achievements. Unlike the superficial validation my family had always focused on, this confidence came from solving complex problems, creating innovative solutions, and earning respect from professors and classmates who valued my contributions. My breakthrough moment came during my senior year when I developed a revolutionary social media algorithm for my capstone project. Professor Margaret Chen, who became my most important mentor, recognized that my privacy-focused approach to social networking could address major concerns about data security that other platforms were ignoring. She encouraged me to think beyond just completing the assignment and consider the real-world applications of what I had created. Under her guidance, I refined the algorithm and began developing a business plan for what would eventually become my company. My first startup attempt happened during my final semester, when I tried to launch a basic version of my platform with minimal funding and no business experience. The venture failed within 6 months, but the lessons I learned about user acquisition, investor relations, and product development were invaluable for my future success. Graduation from MIT was a bittersweet experience. I had achieved academic honors and earned genuine respect from my professors and peers, but my family was notably absent from the ceremony. While other students celebrated with proud families, I sat alone in the audience after walking across the stage, watching other people's joy and feeling the absence of the support system I had never really had. Professor Chen and several classmates invited me to join their celebration dinner, and for the first time I experienced what it felt like to be surrounded by people who were genuinely proud of my accomplishments. They talked about my potential, my innovative thinking, and the impact they believed I could have in the tech industry. It was the validation I had been craving my entire life, but coming from people who valued substance over surface. After graduation, I moved to Silicon Valley with $5,000 in savings, a laptop computer, and an unshakable belief that I could build something meaningful. The initial months were incredibly difficult with rejection after rejection from potential employers who seemed to doubt my abilities despite my MIT degree and demonstrated coding skills. The tech industry in those days was even more dominated by young men than it is now, and I faced constant challenges from people who assumed I was less capable because of my age and gender. Investor meetings were particularly frustrating with venture capitalists, often asking me if I had considered finding a male co-founder who could handle the technical aspects of my business. My salvation came through a coding boot camp where I met David, a brilliant engineer who had been laid off from a major tech company and was looking to start fresh with a new venture. Unlike the dismissive investors and employers I had encountered, David immediately recognized the potential in my social media algorithm and understood the technical sophistication behind what I had built. We became business partners and spent the next year refining my original concept into what would become Secure Connect, a social media platform that prioritized user privacy and data security in ways that no other company was offering at the time. Building Secure Connect from concept to reality required every skill I had developed during my difficult college years, plus countless new abilities that I had to learn through trial and error. David and I worked 18-hour days from a cramped shared office space surviving on instant noodles and coffee, while we perfected our platform's unique approach to social media privacy. Our revolutionary concept was simple, but technically complex. Instead of collecting and selling user data, like every other social platform, Secure Connect would allow people to connect and share content while maintaining complete control over their personal information. Users could choose exactly what data to share with whom and for how long, with automatic deletion features that ensured nothing stayed online permanently without explicit consent. The early days were filled with rejection after rejection from investors who couldn't understand why anyone would want a social platform that didn't monetize user data. Meeting after meeting ended with venture capitalists telling us that our business model was fundamentally flawed because we were leaving money on the table by not exploiting user information for advertising revenue. The sexism and ageism in those investor meetings was often blatant and always exhausting. I was frequently asked if I understood the technical aspects of my own creation or whether David was the real brains behind the operation. Some investors spoke directly to David while completely ignoring my presence even though I was the CEO, and the platform was based on my original algorithm. Everything changed during a major tech conference in San Francisco where I was given the opportunity to present Secure Connect to an audience of industry leaders, investors, and technology journalists. I had been preparing for weeks refining my presentation to clearly explain both the technical innovation and the business potential of our privacy-focused approach. The presentation went perfectly. I demonstrated how our platform could provide all the social connectivity that users wanted while giving them unprecedented control over their personal data. I showed how recent privacy scandals at major tech companies had created a market demand for exactly what we were offering, and I outlined our path to profitability through subscription services rather than advertising. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of my presentation, we had investors contacting us with serious funding offers. Technology journalists were writing articles about the privacy revolution we were leading, and potential users were signing up for our beta testing program faster than our servers could handle the traffic. Our Series A funding round brought in $15 million from a consortium of investors who finally understood that data privacy was going to be a major competitive advantage in the evolving social media landscape. With proper funding, we were able to hire talented engineers, expand our server capacity, and begin marketing to users who were increasingly concerned about how their personal information was being used by other platforms. The Series B round 6 months later brought in $45 million, allowing us to expand internationally and develop additional features that further differentiated us from competitors. By this point, Secure Connect had over 2 million active users and was being featured in major technology publications as the future of social networking. Our Series C funding round was the moment I truly understood how successful we had become. Leading venture capital firms were competing to invest in our company, offering valuations that exceeded my wildest dreams from those early days of rejection and struggle. When we closed that round at a company valuation of $500 million, I officially became one of the youngest female tech entrepreneurs to reach that milestone. The personal transformation that accompanied this professional success was equally dramatic. With financial security for the first time in my life, I was able to invest in professional styling designer clothing and all the external improvements that had once seemed so important to my family. I moved into a penthouse apartment in downtown San Francisco with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, and I purchased a collection of luxury cars that reflected my success and personal taste. Media attention followed business success, and I found myself featured on magazine covers and invited to speak at major conferences around the world. Forbes included me in their 30 Under 30 technology list, and Time magazine featured me in their annual Tech Innovators issue. These recognitions felt especially meaningful because they were based on my achievements and contributions rather than my appearance. My TED Talk about the future of digital privacy has been viewed over 10 million times, and I've been invited to speak at technology summits in London, Tokyo, and Sydney. The girl who once felt too ugly to be in family photos was now being photographed by professional media outlets and recognized as a thought leader in one of the world's most innovative industries. I also began dating Marcus Hamilton, a successful venture capitalist who had initially invested in Secure Connect, but became personally interested in me as our professional relationship developed. Unlike my family's focus on superficial appearances, Marcus valued my intelligence, ambition, and the substance of my character. With financial success came the opportunity to give back through philanthropic work that felt personally meaningful. I established a scholarship fund specifically for underprivileged students pursuing STEM education, particularly focusing on young women who faced barriers similar to what I had experienced. The fund provides not just financial support, but also mentoring and career guidance to help recipients navigate the challenges of building careers in technology. Despite all this external success, I still carried the emotional scars from my family's rejection. Therapy helped me process the pain and understand that their treatment of me reflected their own limitations rather than any deficiency in my worth as a person. However, I made a conscious decision to keep my maiden name professionally, which meant that my family never connected the successful Linda Morrison they read about in business publications with the daughter they had disowned. The internal struggle between my desire for their recognition and my commitment to moving forward without their validation was constant during this period of rapid success. Part of me wanted them to discover my achievements and regret their treatment, while another part of me wanted to prove that I had moved beyond needing their approval entirely. The wedding invitation arrived through my old high school friend Deborah, who had stayed in touch with me over the years despite my family's efforts to erase me from their social circle. She had maintained friendships with several people from our hometown and occasionally shared updates about mutual acquaintances, though she was always careful not to mention my family unless I specifically asked. When she called to tell me about Rose's engagement to Charles Wellington III, I felt a complex mixture of emotions that I hadn't expected. Charles was from one of Connecticut's wealthiest families, old money that traced back generations, and exactly the type of prestigious match my parents had always hoped Rose would make. The engagement had been announced in the society pages of several regional newspapers, complete with photos of the happy couple at various charity galas and social events. Deborah explained that she had received an invitation because she had remained close with Rose throughout college and beyond, and she mentioned that the wedding was being held at Meadowbrook Country Club, the same exclusive venue where my family had been members for decades. The irony wasn't lost on me that Rose was celebrating at a place where I had once been welcome, but was now essentially banned. My initial reaction was to ignore the whole situation and continue focusing on my successful life in California, but something about the timing felt significant. I had just completed a major expansion of Secure Connect into European markets. My relationship with Marcus was becoming more serious, and I felt more confident and secure than ever before in my life. Research into Rose's current situation revealed that she had become exactly what our parents had always encouraged: a beautiful socialite, whose primary accomplishments centered around her appearance and social connections. She had attended an expensive private college where she majored in art history, but never pursued any meaningful career, instead spending her 20s as a professional girlfriend to various wealthy men until landing Charles. I discovered that my parents, while still financially comfortable, were facing some challenges that had reduced their social standing somewhat. My father's law firm had lost several major clients to larger competitors, and my mother's position in local social circles had declined as younger, wealthier families moved into the area and took over leadership roles in the organizations she had once dominated. The decision to attend Rose's wedding came gradually, as I realized this might be an opportunity for closure rather than revenge. I wasn't interested in disrupting her special day or creating a scene that would hurt innocent people, but I was curious about how they would react to seeing the person I had become. My plan was carefully constructed to minimize drama while maximizing the impact of my presence. I would attend as Linda Morrison, the successful tech entrepreneur, rather than Linda Thompson, their estranged daughter. My professional reputation would serve as camouflage, allowing me to observe their reactions without immediately revealing our family connection. I contacted the wedding venue's management through my business connections and discovered that the owner was actually a client of Secure Connect, who had hired us to manage social media privacy for his various hospitality properties. This relationship gave me a legitimate reason to attend the event and ensured that I would be treated as an honored guest rather than an uninvited intruder. Preparing for the wedding required the same attention to detail that I brought to major business presentations. I hired a top stylist in San Francisco to help me select the perfect outfit that would convey success and sophistication without being inappropriate for someone else's wedding. We chose an elegant navy blue designer dress with subtle jewelry that complemented my professional image. Professional makeup and hairstyling completed the transformation, creating a polished appearance that bore little resemblance to the awkward teenager my family remembered. The final touch was arriving in a chauffeur-driven Tesla, which would immediately signal to other guests that I was someone of significance and means. Marcus agreed to accompany me for moral support and credibility, understanding that confronting my past required courage, but believing that I was strong enough to handle whatever emotions might arise from seeing my family again. His presence would also reinforce my status as a successful, accomplished woman rather than a desperate daughter seeking reconciliation. The strategy included practicing responses to potential questions about how I knew the family, rehearsing a story about knowing them socially through business connections that would be technically true while avoiding immediate recognition. I prepared mentally for the possibility that they might not recognize me at all, or that they might recognize me but choose to avoid confrontation during Rose's wedding celebration. Arriving at Meadowbrook Country Club in the chauffeur-driven Tesla felt surreal, like stepping back into a world I had once known, but approaching it from a completely different position of power and independence. The venue looked exactly as I remembered from my childhood, with its manicured gardens, elegant colonial architecture, an atmosphere of understated wealth that signaled exclusive social status. The valet recognized the significance of my arrival, immediately treating me with the deference reserved for important guests while helping me from the car. My designer gown and professional styling created an impression of sophistication that was amplified by Marcus's presence beside me in his perfectly tailored suit. As we entered the reception area, I could feel the subtle shift in attention that comes when someone noteworthy arrives at a social event. Several guests glanced our way with curiosity, some recognizing me from magazine covers or business publications, others simply noting that we appeared to be people of importance based on our presentation and demeanor. The wedding coordinator approached us within minutes, treating me like a VIP guest when she learned my name and realized I was the Linda Morrison whose company had been featured in recent technology publications. She offered to introduce us to other prominent guests and made sure we were seated at a table with other successful business professionals, rather than being relegated to a corner with distant relatives or family friends. From across the reception area, I began scanning the crowd for familiar faces while maintaining conversations with other guests who wanted to discuss Secure Connect or the technology industry in general. The attention felt validating after years of being invisible to my family, but my primary focus remained on observing my parents and Rose without immediately revealing my identity. I spotted my father first engaged in conversation with several other men near the bar. He had aged considerably since I last saw him, with more gray hair and additional weight that suggested the stress of his declining law practice. His laugh seemed forced as he participated in what appeared to be business networking rather than genuine celebration. My mother was holding court near the wedding party's table, dressed in an expensive but slightly outdated outfit that suggested she was trying to maintain appearances despite reduced circumstances. She looked older and more fragile than I remembered, though she still carried herself with the social confidence that had defined her role in our family. Rose herself was radiant in her wedding dress, surrounded by bridesmaids, and appearing genuinely happy as she accepted congratulations from various guests. She looked very much the same as she had 10 years ago, beautiful and charming, though there was a hardness around her eyes that hadn't been there during our teenage years. Other guests continued approaching me throughout the cocktail hour, wanting to take photos or discuss business opportunities. Some mentioned articles they had read about my company, others asked about my thoughts on technology trends, and several business professionals exchanged cards with me for potential future collaborations. The attention I was receiving was beginning to create a buzz among the other wedding guests, with people pointing discreetly in my direction and whispering about the tech celebrity who had somehow ended up at this traditional Connecticut society wedding. I could see my parents glancing over with confusion, clearly wondering who this mysterious important guest might be. The building tension was exactly what I had hoped for, creating curiosity and speculation that would make the eventual revelation more dramatic when it finally occurred. Marcus provided excellent support throughout this process, engaging with other guests naturally while keeping me grounded and focused on my goals for the evening. My father finally made eye contact with me across the room during a lull in his conversation, and I saw his expression shift from polite social interest to genuine confusion as he studied my features. Something about my face was obviously familiar to him, but he couldn't immediately place where he might have seen me before. My mother's reaction was similar when she spotted me talking with the wedding coordinator, her eyes narrowing slightly as she tried to identify why I looked familiar. The partial recognition without immediate identification was creating exactly the type of psychological tension I had hoped to achieve. Rose was still too busy with wedding duties and photo sessions to notice the commotion my presence was creating among the other guests, but I could see that it was only a matter of time before someone would connect the dots between the successful entrepreneur receiving all this attention and the family daughter they had disowned a decade earlier. The moment of revelation began during the cocktail hour when Charles Wellington III approached me with the enthusiasm of someone who had clearly recognized me from business publications and was excited to make a professional connection. He was tall, handsome, and possessed the easy confidence that comes from generations of inherited wealth and social privilege. "Excuse me, aren't you Linda Morrison from Secure Connect?" he asked with genuine excitement, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "I'm Charles Wellington, and I have to tell you, I'm a huge admirer of what you've built. Your approach to data privacy is absolutely revolutionary, and I've been following your company's growth with great interest." His enthusiasm was infectious and completely genuine, representing the type of recognition based on merit and achievement that I had worked so hard to earn. We began discussing the technical aspects of privacy-focused social media and the business challenges of competing against platforms that monetized user data, a conversation that drew the attention of several other guests who were interested in technology trends. Rose appeared beside us during this discussion, looking beautiful in her wedding dress, but slightly confused by her new husband's obvious excitement about talking business at their wedding reception. She smiled politely and waited for a break in our conversation to insert herself into the discussion. "Charles, darling, you promised no business talk today," she said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Though I have to admit, I'm curious about who has captured your attention so completely." Charles immediately turned to include Rose in our conversation, his pride in both his new wife and his business acumen evident in his expression. "Rose, this is Linda Morrison, the tech entrepreneur I was telling you about. She's the CEO of Secure Connect, that privacy-focused social media platform that's been making headlines lately. I can't believe she's here at our wedding." Rose extended her hand with the gracious smile she had perfected through years of social training, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes as she processed my name and studied my features more carefully. The combination of my professional success and my somehow familiar appearance was clearly creating confusion in her mind. "It's lovely to meet you," Rose said politely, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. "I have to ask, how do you know our family? I don't remember Charles mentioning that you would be attending." The question hung in the air as Charles looked between us with growing curiosity, clearly wondering about the connection between his new wife and the successful entrepreneur he admired. I could see Rose's mind working as she continued to study my face, searching for the source of her nagging sense of recognition. "We have some history," I replied calmly, maintaining eye contact with Rose, as I watched comprehension slowly dawn in her expression. "Though it's been quite a while since we've seen each other." Rose's face went progressively paler as the pieces began clicking together in her mind. The familiar bone structure, the sound of my voice, and most significantly, the surname Morrison that had been my maiden name before they erased me from their family entirely. Her champagne glass trembled slightly in her hand as the full realization of who I was began to sink in. "Linda," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the background noise of wedding conversation and music. "Linda Morrison. Morrison was your maiden name." Charles looked back and forth between us with growing confusion, clearly sensing that something significant was happening, but unable to understand the context of Rose's obvious shock. Other guests nearby began noticing the tension developing in our small group, though they couldn't identify the source of Rose's distress. "You two know each other?" Charles asked, his business enthusiasm giving way to husband concern as he noticed his new wife's pale complexion and trembling hands. The moment had arrived for the revelation I had been both anticipating and dreading since deciding to attend this wedding. Rose was staring at me with a mixture of shock recognition and what might have been the beginning of genuine regret as she processed the transformation from the awkward teenager she remembered to the successful woman standing before her. "We used to be family," I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly enough that several nearby guests turned to listen to what was obviously becoming a dramatic moment. The simple statement contained the entire painful history of my rejection, disownment, and subsequent success delivered with the composure I had learned through years of high-stakes business negotiations. Rose's shocked intake of breath was audible, and Charles's confusion deepened as he tried to understand how his accomplished wedding guest could have been family with his new wife. By this point, my parents had noticed the commotion around our group and were approaching with the social instincts honed through decades of managing their public image. My father's expression showed the beginning of recognition, while my mother appeared torn between curiosity about the important guest receiving so much attention and growing awareness that something significant was unfolding. The immediate aftermath of my revelation created a ripple effect throughout the wedding reception as my family processed the shock of discovering that their discarded daughter had become a celebrated tech entrepreneur. Rose stood frozen beside her new husband, her face cycling through emotions from disbelief to embarrassment to what might have been genuine regret. Charles demanded an explanation with the directness of someone accustomed to getting clear answers to important questions. "What do you mean, used to be family?" "Rose, what is she talking about?" My parents had reached our group by this point, drawn by the obvious tension and Rose's visible distress. My father's face showed complete recognition, now his eyes widening as he connected the successful businesswoman receiving VIP treatment with the daughter he had dismissed as worthless 10 years earlier. My mother's reaction was more complex, her expression shifting from social curiosity to horror as she realized that the elegant, accomplished woman being treated like a celebrity at their daughter's wedding was the same person she had called ugly and disowned. The irony of the situation was clearly not lost on her. "That can't be our Linda," my mother whispered loud enough for several nearby guests to hear her voice carrying a note of panic as she processed the implications of my presence and success. Other wedding guests were beginning to gather around our group, sensing that something dramatic was unfolding and curious about the obvious family crisis developing during what should have been a celebration. Some were still taking photos with me, unaware of the personal drama, while others watched with the fascination that comes from witnessing unexpected confrontation. Charles's confusion was rapidly transforming into something that looked like anger as he began to understand that his new wife's family had somehow rejected or mistreated the accomplished woman he admired professionally. "Rose, I need you to explain what's happening here right now." Rose finally found her voice, though it was shaky and uncertain compared to her usual confident social manner. Linda was my sister. We had a falling out years ago, and we haven't spoken since high school." "A falling out," I repeated quietly, my calm tone contrasting sharply with the growing tension around us. "Is that what you call it when your parents tell you that you're too ugly to be part of the family and they don't want an embarrassing daughter anymore?" The brutal honesty of my statement created complete silence in our immediate area, with nearby guests staring openly as they processed this revelation about the family dynamics behind what appeared to be a perfect society wedding. Charles's face showed genuine shock as he began to understand the scope of what his new in-laws had done. My father attempted to take control of the situation with the lawyer's instinct for damage control that had served him throughout his career. "Linda, this isn't the appropriate time or place for family discussions. Perhaps we could arrange to speak privately after the reception." "Actually, I think this is the perfect time and place," I replied calmly. 10 years ago, you decided I wasn't worthy of being included in family celebrations because of how I looked. Tonight, I'm here as a guest celebrating Rose's wedding, and everyone can see exactly who I became after you threw me away." Charles was staring at his new in-laws with obvious disgust as he processed their treatment of someone he respected professionally. "You disowned your own daughter because of her appearance. Are you serious right now?" My mother made a desperate attempt to rewrite history, her voice rising slightly as she tried to control the narrative. "Linda, you're exaggerating what happened. We were concerned about your future and thought some changes might help you succeed in life. We always believed in your potential." The lie was so blatant and self-serving that I almost laughed, but I maintained my composure while other guests continued to listen to every word of this family drama unfolding at what was supposed to be an elegant society wedding. "You removed my photos from the house," I said simply. "You told me I was embarrassing the family name. You cut off all financial support and made it clear I wasn't welcome at family events. Those aren't the actions of parents who believe in their daughter's potential." Rose finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper as tears began forming in her eyes. "Linda, I'm so sorry. We were wrong, and I've regretted it every day since you left. I wanted to reach out so many times, but I didn't know how to apologize for something so terrible." The apology felt genuine, unlike my parents' attempts to minimize their actions, but it couldn't erase the years of pain and the fact that she had chosen their side when I needed support most. Charles was looking at his new wife with an expression that suggested he was reevaluating what he thought he knew about her character. Other wedding guests had pulled out their phones and were either recording the confrontation or researching my background online, clearly fascinated by the dramatic revelation that a successful tech entrepreneur was the rejected daughter of the wedding family. The elegant atmosphere of the country club celebration had been completely transformed by our family crisis. I realized that I had achieved exactly what I came here to accomplish, demonstrating my success, forcing them to confront their treatment of me, and proving that their definition of worth had been fundamentally wrong. But I also recognized that prolonging this confrontation would only hurt Rose on her wedding day and create more drama than necessary for closure. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding. I told Rose, my voice softening slightly, as I saw genuine remorse in her expression. I came here because I needed to see who you all became, and I needed you to see who I became. Now we all know where we stand. Charles was still staring at my parents with obvious disgust, clearly struggling to reconcile their behavior toward me with the respectful treatment he believed family members deserved. The revelation about their character was obviously affecting his perception of the family he had just married into. The wedding reception continued around us, but our small group remained the center of attention as other guests watched the dramatic conclusion of a family conflict that had been building for over a decade. I had gotten the recognition and vindication I didn't realize I needed, but I had also learned that revenge felt less satisfying than I had expected. The resolution of this decade-long family conflict required careful navigation between my desire for complete vindication and my recognition that Rose's wedding day shouldn't be entirely destroyed by our family drama. I had accomplished my primary goals of demonstrating my success and forcing them to confront their past treatment, but I also realized that prolonged confrontation would diminish rather than enhance my position. Charles was clearly struggling to process what he had learned about his new in-laws, alternating between concern for Rose and obvious disgust at their treatment of me. As someone who valued professional achievement and personal integrity, he seemed genuinely appalled by their superficial standards and cruel rejection of their own daughter. "I can't believe you would treat your own child this way," he said to my parents, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being respected, but now questioning the character of the people he had just joined through marriage. My parents were attempting damage control with the social skills honed through decades of managing their public image, but their explanations sounded hollow and self-serving to everyone listening. My mother kept insisting that they had always supported my education, while my father claimed they were concerned about my future happiness and thought some improvements might help. Rose surprised me by stepping forward with what appeared to be genuine courage, addressing her new husband directly despite the obvious implications for their relationship. "Charles, they're telling the truth about what they did. We were horrible to Linda, and she had every right to cut contact with us. I've been ashamed of how we treated her ever since she left." Her honesty in front of the wedding guests and willingness to contradict our parents' revisionist history showed a maturity and integrity that I hadn't expected. It didn't excuse her original participation in my rejection, but it demonstrated personal growth that gave me hope for eventual reconciliation. Other wedding guests were beginning to disperse as the immediate drama subsided, though many lingered nearby with obvious curiosity about the outcome of this family confrontation. Some approached me with business cards or requests for photos, still treating me as the accomplished entrepreneur rather than focusing on the family conflict. I made the decision to leave the reception early, recognizing that my presence would continue to overshadow Rose's celebration, and that prolonging the confrontation wouldn't serve anyone's interests. My goals had been accomplished through demonstration rather than extended argument. "I'm going to leave now," I announced to the group, directing my words primarily to Rose while acknowledging my parents with a polite nod. "I hope you have a wonderful marriage, and I wish you both genuine happiness." Charles immediately stepped forward with obvious sincerity, extending his hand for another firm handshake. "Linda, I want you to know that I have tremendous respect for what you've accomplished, and I'm genuinely sorry about how you were treated. If you're ever willing, I'd love to continue our conversation about Secure Connect under better circumstances." His response validated my professional achievements, while also signaling disapproval of my family's behavior, which felt like exactly the type of recognition I had hoped to receive. Marcus and I prepared to leave, having achieved closure rather than revenge. Rose approached me privately as we prepared to depart, her eyes filled with tears but her voice steady with determination. "Linda, I know I don't deserve forgiveness after what we did, but I want you to know that I've never stopped regretting how we treated you. You were always the strongest and smartest person in our family, and we were too shallow and stupid to appreciate what we had." Her apology felt genuine and complete, acknowledging both the specific harm they had caused and taking personal responsibility for her role in my rejection. It didn't erase the years of pain, but it offered the possibility of gradual healing if we both chose to pursue it. 6 months later, Rose and I began exchanging occasional emails, slowly rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. She had apparently used the aftermath of the wedding confrontation to establish healthier boundaries with our parents and develop her own sense of values independent from their superficial standards. My parents made several attempts to reconnect, but their efforts focused on claiming credit for my success, rather than acknowledging the harm they had caused. I maintained polite but distant contact, protecting my emotional well-being while leaving the door open for genuine reconciliation if they ever developed the self-awareness necessary for authentic apology. My relationship with Marcus grew stronger through his witnessing of my family confrontation and his understanding of the emotional strength required to handle such a difficult situation with grace. His support during the wedding and afterward reinforced my confidence in building relationships based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility. Secure Connect continued thriving, eventually going public with a valuation that exceeded $1 billion and establishing me as one of the most successful female entrepreneurs in the technology industry. The personal validation of professional success felt meaningful, but the real satisfaction came from building something that improved people's lives while staying true to my values. My philanthropic work expanded to include programs specifically designed for young people who had been rejected by their families, providing both financial support and emotional guidance for building independent, successful lives. The scholarship fund grew into a comprehensive foundation that helped hundreds of students pursue STEM education despite family opposition or financial hardship. The most important lesson from this entire experience was understanding that family relationships must be based on mutual respect and unconditional love, rather than superficial expectations or social status. Real family supports you during difficult times, rather than abandoning you when you don't meet their arbitrary standards. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right and building a life that reflects your values rather than their limitations. The people who can't see your worth don't deserve your energy, but forgiveness can coexist with healthy boundaries that protect your peace and continued growth. Looking back now, I'm grateful for the rejection that forced me to develop independence and resilience that I might never have discovered otherwise. Sometimes the most painful experiences become the foundation for the greatest achievements, not because of the pain itself, but because of how we choose to respond to adversity. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been rejected by people who should have supported you, only to discover that their rejection freed you to become something greater than they ever imagined? How did you find the strength to build success despite family disapproval or social expectations? Share your transformation stories in the comments below, because your journey might inspire someone else who's struggling with similar challenges. Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you and showed you that family rejection doesn't define your worth or limit your potential. Subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity and building success on your own terms. And please share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're worthy of love and respect, regardless of other people's shallow judgments. Thank you for listening to my journey from rejection to recognition. And remember that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose rather than the ones we're born into. Your worth isn't determined by people who can't see your value, and your future is limited only by your own determination to prove that their small-minded expectations were never worthy of your potential in the first place.